really want to touch on a few points today and how, we're helping everybody reach scale and precision within these connected moments, and how you're adapting to, the new normal and getting out of the new normal and utilizing OTT and SVOD and AVOD. But I think the biggest question on everybody's mind, specifically for you, is hot or iced coffee every morning. We all got to know.
It's funny. I bucked the trend of like what we're trying to do from a consumer in a brand forward position. I'm the old guard of the hot black coffee. And, I guess I'll admit this. I try not to admit this too much, but my softer side is, believe it or not, I've always loved flavor. I've a French vanilla flavoring in my coffee. And when I showed up, we did a segmentation analysis a couple of years ago, and I found that Dunkin', it blows away our competition on people who come to us for flavor. So I found out why I must have always loved Dunkin' so much. So it was a match made in heaven. Match made in French vanilla heaven.
That's the French vanilla is still my go-to ever since I was in college. It's gotten slightly darker as the years have gone on. I was very heavy cream and sugar guy when I first got out of school, but now I'm more to the darker side of the cold brew. So
yeah.
All good stuff. All right, well, great. Well, we're going to jump into a few questions here, and then as we move through this, we'll take some questions from the audience. But, as you and I have spoken about the exponential growth that has been, people staying at home and streaming and utilizing OTT and SVOD and AVOD, how has your channel strategy changed, and how does linear play a role in your advanced TV strategies?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think sort of pre-pandemic, heading into the year, we really got a lot more aggressive in getting away from sort of a traditional television and more in what we call data-driven linear television. And we really had this pivot from a sort of very our strategy had been sort of the ubiquity of everybody drinks coffee, loves donuts, we're run every store, we have a real estate strategy, and it was very much just always a mass awareness play. And then I think we slowly started to realize, like we just talked about briefly, Jim, was everyone had very specific tastes, and how they took their coffee. And I've always been a big believer in my entire career, of like, follow the consumer, kind of an adage, if you will. And I feel like for a long time in my career, it was talked about, but the tools weren't really in place to live that. And I feel like the tools were finally in place for us to say, we're going to do a segmentation study. And I was lucky enough to get to Dunkin' when it was still early on, and said, let's do a segmentation study with a typing tool built in where we can plug it into an agency and actually plan and buy the segments that we're going to find out about. So it really became for us, like how we headed into the year, our strategy was very much about buying segments, not demographics. Mm-hmm. And it was funny, when the pandemic hit, we'll punt for a second and maybe talk about down the road the business disruption, day part disruption, all that stuff. But yep. I was originally thinking to myself, whoa, obviously there's going to be a lot more video consumption, and I thought sort of the traditional linear models were going to have their day. I'm sitting around, people trying to find so much content, and it was really interesting. I learned it went the other way, and traditional kind of ran out of content, and there was even less time spent. And it's interesting now, sports, for example, got put on hold. And I thought when the summer rolled around in August, everyone would just say, oh my God, I've missed sports so much. And all the ratings, in the fall, and the NBA and the bubble, it was down dramatically. And it really shocked me. So what I would say, to answer the question a long-winded way, we went in wanting to be less focused on traditional buys and more focused on segment buys and video and sort of screen agnostic. And actually, if anything, the pandemic pushed us to go even further in that direction, quite frankly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with that segmentation, as you're not looking at so much of a demographic perspective, how is that data fed into the segmentation? You said you've taken more of a data-driven approach. How is that fed into the segmentation? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so we work very collaboratively with our media partner, Publicis Media, and it was a centerpiece of a pitch that we had done in 2018 to find a partner that had tools that we could use to plug our segmentation into, and then those tools then could plug into the sellers of the video inventory. So there was literal matching and not just surrogacy, if you will. And then one of the benefits of working with Publicis that happened post pitch, that was a bit serendipitous for us, was Publicis bought Epsilon, and Epsilon runs our loyalty database for us. So we were able to pour all our loyalty members and do a direct one-to-one match. So we know when we're reaching loyalty members, or if you're not a loyalty member, in every piece of media that we bought.
That's great. Yeah, we've seen a ton of shift towards loyalty programs for all QSR, and even the fast casual restaurants as well. They're starting to really own in on that, and all that data has become super important. It's actually a perfect segue into what we're going to discuss specifically for here. The new commute, if you will, there's been significant change in how people are commuting, or when they're commuting, or even if they're commuting at all. What does that look like from a loyalty perspective, for Dunkin', and how you're adapting to that? Has there been an increase in foot traffic in the late morning, early afternoon? How are you tracking that from a data perspective?
Yeah, definitely has been an increase in foot traffic in late morning. And I would say we have a somewhat, relatives to / somewhat scientific approach to monitoring that. And it's essentially a cabin fever effect of, I get up, when we think about iced coffee, so for myself, I'm a hot coffee drinker. That becomes very easy. And one of the strains on hot coffee, even before the pandemic, was it's very easy to replicate at home. Iced coffee is even, somewhat of a challenge, but many people do that. So that, the morning people sort of got up, made their coffee, and we saw, and it wasn't a commute. You weren't stopping by Dunkin' on as part of your commute. But people got cabin fever, missed us, hopefully. Hopefully it wasn't. They could go anywhere. So they did vote to go to us. So there was the brand love, and I missed Dunkin'. And so that latency of my routine being disrupted, but I missed Dunkin'. And they came in the late morning. And, the benefit for us was pretty obvious. In the morning commute, while we lost a great morning commute and a number of transactions, at 6, 7, 8 in the morning, people going to work. When people came at 11, they were going back to a household that now had multiple members in it. So they were buying for more than just themselves. Whereas our old routine in the morning, we call them the one-armed bandits. People came in and bought, just a coffee for themselves. But now when you go back home and if you have, a roommate or a spouse or a partner, and you have children perhaps that are coffee drinkers, like you just saw people coming back with the ticket got a lot higher. Transactions went down, not as many people kept the routine, but the ticket went up. And as the transactions came back, we actually saw an increase in our overall business.
That's great. I will have to disagree with you. No matter how many times I make coffee at home, it never comes out the same. So that's one of the reasons that I continue to drink 3 cups of coffee outside of the house every day, which my wife is not happy with the money I spent, but I digress. I need good coffee always. And touching on all of that and how that's changed, what are the media strategies that have played into that? Have you used specific more day parts, or are you looking at just those ticket times? So how has that fed into your overall strategy?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and Jim, and sort of again going back pre-pandemic, and when I started at Dunkin', I felt like we were actually over reliant on what I'll call just sort of a lazy approach to, well, we're a morning brand, let's advertise in the morning. And I think there's, don't get me wrong, people are making choices in the morning and you need to reach them, but I didn't think choosing your brand or getting a routine around coffee is so much about a day part, as to finding the right time when our segments are thinking about that. And I thought there was, we had other approaches that we were using that were less day part specific. But one of the examples I'll give you where we had to pivot. So in other words, we didn't really have to pivot that much because I never felt like we should advertise exclusively in the morning per se. A couple of things we did have to pivot on. One, I'll give an example. We still use a lot of audio and particularly local radio, and we do a lot of DJ endorsement, DJ reads. That actually held up pretty well. People's routines were disrupted, but their ratings didn't drop that much locally. But there was a little bit of a drop, and people aren't commuting, aren't in their cars, aren't streaming over a train ride. So we did have to back down on some of that. The other thing was navigation. That's been a huge part of our strategy, working with partners at Google around, being present as people navigate, and Google will tell you they saw a drop in navigations. So we had to find a way to kind of move from those partners. It wasn't they were losing it in the morning, but we were just moving away from them overall. And I think some of the replacements or how we moved around our strategy, and I think it helped us accelerate something we should be thinking about anyway, which is broadening our radio strategy to think about audio. And it helped push us into more streaming audio. And that has matured greatly as far as now, I remember years ago, you buy a podcast, you were embedded into that podcast. You didn't know how many people downloaded it. Now you can insert yourself into podcasts, in an audience targeted way. It's more flexible. We have also worked with a company called AdSwiz, which is great at helping us, whatever genre of music you're listening to, it changes the bed of the music in our ad. So it's much more consumer adaptive. So we've really broadened our audio strategy, a little bit more. And then I would also say Google, being Google, of course, we were able to optimize within the Google platform. And while there was less navigation, particularly in the early days of pandemic, there was a big increase in search, and people just need to understand, are you open? What are your new hours? Do I need a mask? So there was a lot more search around, availability. So we invested more money in search, more than we ever had before.
That's great. Now, with investing that in search, how did you play that back to using your linear and CTV opportunities to tie that all back into the audio portion? Because now you have a lot of mediums, right? And you're trying to find all of those non-commuters anymore and everything else. What was the holistic approach on that, and how did linear and CTV play a factor into that decision to move into audio as well?
Yeah, it's it's kind of interesting. We still have, when I think about just video in general, and our linear our sort of connected TV and digital video strategy, so much of that is done through set-top boxes and still using your tremendously powerful Samsung television to stream the content, stream the internet through that screen. It's still the second screen effect was still very much real for us. So for example, we're almost Saturday will mark, it's a big anniversary. It's a big day for the country for a lot of reasons, but I'll always remember last year, June 19th was the day that we launched our refreshers product. And it was remarkable for us because it was the first product messaging that we did since the pandemic hit in early March. Everything else had been about brand, hours, safety. And then we finally were able to launch a product, and it was brand new to us. Dunkin had never done anything like that before. And we didn't have the opportunity to test it in advance. So we kind of went at it, and I used some tried and true tactics of, we're targeting, the specific segments we need to target through, connected TV, but we also use that multi-screen effect that people are watching while they still have a mobile device in their hand, and they're searching for, ooh, Dunkin' has refreshers. What's in them? What do they look like? How are they different than Starbucks refreshers? And we use those two as an advantage, as far as tying strategies in our search to play off of the messages that we were putting in our video.
That's great. I mean, so you got the cross media mix there. So it leads me to my next question is, maintaining that consumer loyalty even throughout the pandemic and beyond is super important. And you just mentioned that you didn't even launch a new product until June 19th of last year for the refreshers. How did you maintain that loyalty over the 12 months, with walk-in services and only mobile pickup available in certain locations and locations closing down? So how did that affect, the planning and really the decision to go into a new product in June?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Jim. And I wish I could tell you I have a perfect answer, but I really don't. I will say this, for the QSR business as a whole, you have to, loyalty has a sort of Webster's dictionary definition of it, but I think it's flexible depending on your business. So in the QSR category, loyalty is like, if you're getting, more than half of somebody's visits, you can consider them loyal. Nobody's exclusive anymore. So what was interesting for us is like, how do when you say, how do you maintain loyalty? I mean, for us, loyalty is, get an incremental trip, so if you don't come at all, I want to get one trip. If you're infrequent, maybe I can get you from 1 to 2 trips. And we even look at our most loyal customers, who many of them come, believe it or not, 5 times a week or more. Can I actually get a 6th trip? And I think a lot of that is driven by business offers, quite frankly. We
Hmm.
improved our loyalty program and started offering, making better offers to incentivize people to come in on certain days. But one of the things that we did do, Jim, was in the past, we had done those offers probably more specifically through our own channels and just offer up to our loyalty members, hey, we're having a points offer, come in Friday. But we used it last year as a recruitment opportunity, and we started targeting people with our offers. And that's where our digitally led strategy, in things like connected TV, being able to actually, we had offers that were, if you were a member already or you weren't a member already, how we positioned the offer. And in one case in particular, during the pandemic, we actually did the annoying cable company thing where we gave an offer exclusively just for non-members, so we did a lot of that, tested and learned a lot of that. And again, the ability to target and know our segments and find channels, Jim, where we know if you already are a member or aren't, was huge to us, having the courage to be able to put those sort of segment those offers.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. I think everybody loves a comeback story, in the QSR Vertical, as well as just all restaurants are looking to have this, post-pandemic comeback and driving that loyalty. Even for me, it's the loyalty for Dunkin' is great here. Is bringing my daughter in for a donut. My dad used to do it with me right here in Long Island every day, and we still go to the same Dunkin' Donuts. So I think that has a factor in everybody becoming loyalists as well. So very cool stuff. Leading into mobile a little bit, as we talk about those programs and driving force behind them. What are the changes from the changes in consumer habits like that impacted Dunkin' Rewards? You were trying to get the new ones to come in as well as the old ones, but gave those new offers. Talk to me a little bit about Dunkin' Rewards and how that changed from the mobile perspective over the past 12 months.
Yeah, one of the decisions, so a couple of things, and try to be brief if I can, but I again, like you're noticing a theme, I want to talk about sort of strategies and tactics in place pre-pandemic.
Mm,
And one of the things that we were trying to leverage as a differentiator for Dunkin', we have a 10 now almost 12-year plus strategy and tagline that everybody is familiar with, which is America runs on Dunkin'. And I think, we for everybody else, they probably just see it and don't think much about it. But when you see it every day, you obsess over every little thing about it.
mm,
And the word run, even pre-pandemic, was one we really focused on. Like, we are not come in, sit down for 3 hours, and we have Wi-Fi and we have seats you can sit, but that's not our
mm.
promise. That's not where
Yep.
we shine. We shine with getting you going. We fuel you for your day. And what was kind of interesting is that thought process probably suffered a little bit in the pandemic. Like, there was less
Hmm.
running and
Yep.
more sheltering. Running and sheltering aren't necessarily compatible. But we still embrace the idea of, like, you still wanted to get in and out, of Dunkin'. So one of the things we had done to prepare for this idea of, like, we want to keep you running, and speed is our most important thing. Great coffee fast is what we stand for. And one of the things we had done is we first off, we were one of the first QSRs to have a loyalty program. Our DD Perks program is one of the first in the industry. So we had an advantage and a head start over some of our competitors in that regard, having a built-in base. Then I think the second component of that was we always had that Perks program. If you wanted to order ahead, you had to join Perks,
Hmm.
and you had to preload funds. And that was a barrier for some people. They said, hey, listen, there's probably some advantage of being in a loyalty program, but I don't necessarily want to, like, the first thing I do is give you my email address and my credit card, and that was a barrier for a lot of people. So we had already made a decision the year prior to be tender agnostic. And we were the first in our competitive category set, including that big coffee company that started out of Seattle in 1972. We were the first to have the ability to do tender agnostic to our app. So you could order and pay and not have to join the loyalty program or preload funds. So that was actually a big help. So one of the ways I want to answer your question is, we actually grew mobile orders without necessarily having to have people join our loyalty program. And that's a good way to have people get introduced to you. If you haven't bought you in a while, like, they see you, they like you, they use you multiple times, then they join your loyalty program. So we got to see people joining the program that way. So I would say that, again, going back to the original question, how did the Perks program, it was more the decision we had made, fortunately, 8 months prior to the pandemic, of being tender agnostic and allowing people to use us that way, was a big win for us. And then a lot of those people had already started doing that when the pandemic hit, and they were looking for sort of that daily routine. That helped them then upgrade to our perks program.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, as the app usage continues to grow, I mean, you're just going to see the ease of use and the customization. I think you and I have spoken briefly about for a while is going to be super important. So with that, in the increased use of the mobile app during the pandemic, how have you tried to market that and tie it back to both linear CTV and even your audio portion? Is that kind of in the media mix, or what are you looking to do moving forward as far as your app goes?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think one of the challenges I'm very obsessed as a media, person. I'm obsessed with the idea of, adapting to consumer behavior. And I feel like when you ask consumers to change for you, is that's where it's too tall an ask. You sort of, blending into consumer behavior. And I just, bluntly, and with everybody listening, truthfully, I struggle with, it doesn't sound like a big deal to put an app on your phone, but people are pretty precious about what's on the home screen of their phone. And
Yeah.
unless they're using you all the time, they just don't want the app. And so for us, I think one of the things we're trying to unlock is actual mobile web ordering. Just make ordering easier. Our app is super easy, and getting the app is easy. So it passes the sniff test of, like, if you want to order through Dunkin' on the go, you want a mobile order for Dunkin', it's really easy to do. It is not hard. But for some people, it's still a barrier. So our strategy has to be to continue to try. It's not so much about promoting what we have. I think we need to broaden what we don't have, quite frankly. But having said that, there are certain partners we've been able to work with to link ordering specifically, like, I'll give you things like Waze. I mentioned before, navigation's down, so we're not doing as much there. But we've been able to really innovate in that space and come up with ways for one-touch ordering, there. I think, certain digital placement, social media, has definitely had some challenges over the last year. But one of the great things about social media is, we used to have a call to action in social media that was just about find a store. And we always kind of felt like, and I'm selfish, like when you think about our base, where I am here in Massachusetts, like finding a store isn't a problem. You kind of have to blindfold yourself to not find a store around here. But knowing, being able to order to that store was important. So we were able to switch our call to action to specifically, if you had the app, we were able with some partners to now link directly into your app to the order page, or at worst, link to an app page to download the app. But what I'd like to really do is not make people go to the app page and download the app. I'd like to start linking to the mobile order. And then if you've already ordered from us, what I'd really like in our app, we have your favorite, and you just want to keep reordering your favorite. Let's have that be one touch and actually live in the environment you're in. For example, like Apple CarPlay in your car. Like that's what we want to do.
Yeah. I think you and I have discussed that. I thought it'd be pretty cool as you're driving to it and being able to have those app orders of one touch for your vehicles, whether you're using, a Google or Amazon Alexa to help you partner with that. And you've touched on partnerships quite a bit. And Dunkin's always been great with a lot of collaboration, whether it be with, sports teams or anybody in general. I'm curious to talk about a little bit some of the gaming stuff that you've been doing. You have partnerships with Twitch, excuse me. And I'd love to know how you're looking at that switcher audience for the gamers and how you're partnering with Twitch to help, reach those consumers who are not specifically loyal to Dunkin.
Yeah, I would say, the Twitch, our gaming strategy in general is pretty straightforward. It's an incredibly hard to reach audience, and there's a lot of time spent gaming. And so finding a way into that space is important. Otherwise, that's just a very hard to reach group. And then I mentioned our strategy again going into the year. We had last year, we had already had several. We went through an influencer strategy. We were already working through gaming. But one of the things I mentioned before was I was surprised at how I thought, quote unquote, the linear sort of cable provided television was those ratings were going to go up, and they didn't. Yeah. In fact, they went down pretty significantly. And then what not surprisingly, what you saw was a 39% increase in overall gaming, and in terms of the number of people who started gaming, but then more importantly, people who added extra time to their gaming. So for us, that was something we desperately needed to accelerate. And it's pretty simple. It's just an audience we really can't reach any other way. It's not about any kind of different food offering or anything else, but it's an audience that's hard to reach in other areas. And I also feel like it's such a developing platform from an ad perspective that if you get it right, you can actually be seen to be part of making gaming accessible. Like you can be a brand that actually unlocks and makes things happen, as opposed to just slapping your wallpaper logo on things. So that's been our approach, is like, how can we help make this seem better than what it was? And one of the things that helped us, but Jim, I'll tell you, we of course we did some smart things about when people were at home. And we upped our delivery. For example, everybody, during pandemic was delivery was up. And so we worked with partners and did special offers, just for gamers that, didn't want to take the headphones off and leave the, couch. They could, we did specific delivery offers through third party.
Guilty as charged on that one. I try when I actually do get the opportunity to play games when my kids aren't bothered, when I actually get some time for myself, but guilty as charged on that one.
Yeah. And I sorry, Jim, I'm going to actually answer it live. I saw a question come in, so specific to Twitch, and it was a great one about how do you manage brand safety for Twitch.
Great. Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like brand safety in general is still as we've moved more digital, like it's been great to have more segments, but now the issue of viewability and brand safety is a bigger deal now. So it makes me cautious. One of the things with Twitch, for now at least, as we've managed brand safety, is we specifically bought around a series. So Twitch has their Rivals series. We've activated specifically within Rivals, and we even chose to go a step further. And this is unique to Dunkin, so this is just us, and being more family oriented and trying to have a broad appeal. We've even tried to stay away. I mean, some of the reason that held us back from gaming was many of the most popular games, Call of Duty and things like that, first person shooter games. We didn't necessarily think that was the right place for our brand. So we've kind of stayed more within Twitch Rivals, which is a fun way. It's more the competitive aspect of gaming and competing against other people that I think is more inherent and brand safe, for at least for Dunkin.
That's great. You mentioned brand safety and viewability, and it actually segues us into measurement specifically. You're doing so many different mediums, whether it be CTV or linear or audio and digital as well. When you look back on 2020 and all the changes and challenges that you've had, how have you measured success over that? Has it been specifically on the ticket sizes? Has it been on VCR? What's kind of what are the metrics that you've been attributing to success?
Yeah, no, great question. And again, I'm going to stick true to my mantra of pre and during pandemic measurement. I think, one of the things that I'm proud that we had a lot of success with in 2019 leading into 2020 was we moved towards incremental visitation measurement. So we, by the end of 2019, I think we were at 75% of all of our media was tagged with measuring exposure to incremental visit, not just visit, because we didn't want to take credit for visits were going to happen anyway, but through test and control sampling, we were able to determine where we got an extra visit. And that was a big initiative that was in place where we're actually up to over 90% today. But so we were always measuring incremental visitation, Jim. But what was interesting is like we actually had to kind of take a step back during second quarter last year in the pandemic. And there was a lot of different questions on people's mind as far as when we were running our advertising, what were we trying to communicate? We're still trying to get people to go to the restaurants, but what we were trying to communicate was safety. People wanted to know, do you have plastic screens up? Is your crew wearing masks? Does the store have a drive-through? Clearly, drive-through was a huge advantage for us versus, again, that green lady out in Seattle. Our model was built around that version of safety, if you will, where there's a drive-through and people saw that as a safe way to visit and leave the house. So we measured success around good old-fashioned attitudinal studies and just how were people responding to, did we answer your question? Do you feel we're providing a safe environment? So there was a lot more old school, I wouldn't call it awareness necessarily, Jim, but it was kind of awareness of that message, and was that resonating with people, and did it mean something to them? So we actually did kind of take a step back from that cost per incremental visit, and we bought some video inventory based more around, were we landing in a short period of time at high scale and frequency, the notion that Dunkin provided you a safe place to transact.
That's great. And taking that step back and reevaluating that and kind of looking at a little bit more tried and true methods, right? Methodology, that instead of some of the new incremental visitation portions, have you looked to develop any type of measurement specifically for Dunkin, like a scorecard or anything like that you guys are working on off of that to kind of help you move into 21 and 22 and beyond that?
Yeah, no. So I mean, our scorecard is definitely tied around. We measure all of our channels our segments and our messages on cost per incremental visit. That's definitely our gold standard. I think one of the things that was on our work plan for early 2020, but we slowed because of the pandemic, we waited, is an attribution study. So what we can understand, Jim, is sort of individually in silo channels, and how they're driving incremental visitation. But what we weren't able to understand is like the journey, if you will. So we have an attribution study in play now to understand. And I'll give you an easy example is, and this isn't any news to anybody on this panel, is, search always wins in any kind of, visit, cost per click, whatever you want to do. Search is always the cheapest, right? Because it's the most targeted and it's the way you bid and pay. But you can't put all your money in search, like you still need scale. You have to, so finding a scientific way of understanding the balance is the journey we're on right now.
Got it. Cool. Well, we got a few minutes here before we take some Q&A, and I want to talk about some opportunities that lie ahead within the future. The QSR space is finally getting out of this thing. We're seeing a lot of positive momentum, to not even talk about the pandemic, and it'll hopefully be behind us in a few months here. So as you look towards that, what are some of the things that you're looking towards to inform or enhance your TV strategy for the future, specifically in CTV and linear, and that combination and to your other media mixes?
Yeah, a couple of things, and it's interesting. So Dunkin we have an interesting mix of, we have so many stores that we are a national brand, but we're a national brand that in certain areas has different business pressures. And what I mean by that is, where I am here in Boston, or if you're in New York, Dunkin's a very mature brand that doesn't suffer an awareness issue. That it's readily available. People know what it is. But as we expand, and we've expanded certainly out west, southwest, west California, there isn't, there's the sort of the transplants from the East Coast that grew up with it that flock there. But for people that grew up out there, they don't actually know Dunkin as well. So awareness and consideration, is very different. I mean, you can go to Revere Beach and there's probably 5 guys walking around with a tattoo of Dunkin on their leg. And then you go to LA and people are like, wait, what is that? Is that the place with the donuts, a crispy? They don't know. So we have an issue of like, what do we need to communicate, in terms of where are people on their awareness ladder? And then the other piece of it is, different pressures. So there's some markets are pressured by convenience stores. Grocery and convenience right now is probably the biggest threat to QSR in general, just as far as they want a piece of the pie of ready to go. So there's different pressures competing against local businesses that do serve that. So one of the things we've always struggled with is, buying local media is tremendously inefficient, and it's built around a really tired model of TV signals and radio signals that were built in the 40s and 50s around the country. And it's just not a good way to buy your media. I would rather do segment media, and part of segmentation is knowing your geography. And what I'm really excited about, for us, but probably even more for QSR, is I had a boss a couple of years ago, I'll remain nameless, who asked me, couldn't we just solve this by buying national video, and then for TV, we'll do cut-ins of local spots on a national buy? And I was just like, we'll have a whole separate discussion around anyone who's worked on packaged goods like I have. Cut-ins is like, it makes you cry. I was like, that's not the way. But the way video is going at an household addressable level, like we can start to buy, like that's the solution. Don't think about inserting into a linear model. Buy it digitally and use geography as a segment filter. So that's what I'm really excited about, to make our media work harder, is to be able to buy against segments, but geography will give us the opportunity to maybe put different messages in depending upon that geographic location.
Yeah, you sparked something in my head as we were just discussing that, is specifically the locale portion of it. And CTV gives you that opportunity to really narrow down within those households and kind of leveraging those audio buys as well as everything else. So to your point, not utilizing those cut-ins, but being excited to really narrow down that targeting and drive that ROI, if you will. So that's great. Yeah. You just mentioned that you were excited about a lot of things. What do you think are some of the future opportunities, not only for Dunkin, but QSR overall? Coming out of this, you mentioned some of the locations that you have, and I have a cousin that's in the Navy in San Diego that when his Dunkin got there, he was very excited. He was born and bred in New York, and now he's in the Navy in San Diego. When the Dunkin opened there, he couldn't have been more excited. So, what do you see for the QSR vertical overall? Do you think it's going to be only mobile locations only? Do you think there is going to be some dine-in still? How do you see fit?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. And by the way, go back to your cousin. Like, we actually have a fully non-manned full order without, it's self-serve, pay with your app. It's a partnership with MasterCard. We have a location in Miramar, so if he's out of Top Gun, he can do that. So we're excited about that. That's a one-time pilot, so we'll see where that goes. No, I guess I'll just say at a high level, like, we always talk about personalization at scale as a buzzword for us, and how do we offer a multitude of products. People take their coffee a million different ways. Like, how do we make our ads personalized? And you're seeing that a lot at the restaurant level. And McDonald's years ago bought Dynamic Yield and tried to bring personalization to the menu boards. And that gets into a greater conversation of AI in general. And I think that's the biggest unknown for me, but it's the biggest opportunity is how do we use AI? And there's so many like fits and starts, years ago, AI meant I need an Alexa skill, and it's like, man, anyone who spent time, for us at least, and we didn't spend a lot of time on it, but you're spending time building an Alexa skill to someone's going to yell at their speaker to order a coffee that's just not real, So AI is a great opportunity, but it's also such a great unknown. That's probably the biggest one at a big generalization.
Yeah, that could be dangerous. My daughter knows how to say "Okay, Google" quite a bit, so there'd be a lot of different coffees at our house if she had her way.
Don't let her know the Amazon Prime password. We learned that one the hard way.
Yeah, we've had that issue before already. I think many parents on this this video call have had that
for
as
sure.
well.
For sure.
So just I want to wrap it up here. I think we got one final question, and I think maybe we'll take a few Q&A. But what's next for Dunkin'? And then how do you see the Dunkin' app evolving? As you said, it's continuing to grow, and you guys are always working on that customization portion for coffee, and any refreshers and all beverages is important. What's next?
Yeah, I think we mentioned about ease of use. So I think for the app, just in terms of physical use of the app, I think making our media connected to it easier, making it, less touch, one touch, two touch to get an order will be important. Having mobile ordering, if you don't want to have the app, I think will be important to us, as we move forward. But the biggest thing for us is, and unfortunately it's not ready for prime time yet, but we take great pride in having one of the first loyalty programs in overall QSR. Starbucks, to their credit, has a great loyalty program, and certainly has a lot of members. But I think we take great pride in innovation in our loyalty program. So I think right now our loyalty program is really well liked, but it's very specific to Dunkin' in that you order it's a certain amount of dollars spent, and that transitions to a free beverage, and it automatically converts you to a free beverage. And I think a lot of people in the airline and hospitality area, now that we're getting back to that, the gaming of loyalty programs and the point stacking and when and how you use them, that's the flexibility and freedom that people want out of loyalty programs. So I think you're going to see us adapt and change to make it flexible and reward people differently based on how much they use. I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah. That's great, Keith. Appreciate it. I think we have some time to take some questions, Jesse, or I think we got some right here.
We can take a quick question. We need to keep going, but we can take one.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you were able to see this one, Keith, but can you elaborate on your influencer marketing strategy and measurement criteria?
Yeah. Great answer. Or great question, I should say. I would say that over the last year and a half, we've probably pulled back a lot on what we'll call just sort of influencer networks, and that just sort of pay to play of like, selling, get you buying through a collaboration of people that offer you influencers. We have had a hard time measuring that and don't know what we get for success off of that. I mean, having someone say, well, your post generated, X amount of engagements, whether they're likes, reposts, comments. I just don't know that that's really worked for us. I think what's funny enough for us, it's kind of simple, but the biggest home run has been finding people who are expressing love for us and then developing the relationship from there. So probably our best influencer strategy execution in the last year is Charlie D'Amelio. And here's someone that is, I mean, fortunately for us, 100 million followers, and loves our brand and would post videos of herself, going, wearing our merch, going to our stores before we were even working with her. And then that just developed organically into a spot on the menu and just more collaboration. So I think our influencer strategy, and again, this is for us, every brand's going to be different, but we're fortunate enough that we have a lot of celebrities who like us and or influencers. Let's not say celebrity. Let's say influencer, people with influence who already like us. I think that's where we're thinking now we have to develop it. Buying influence just isn't going to work as well for us. We can't measure it as much as seeing people express love for us and then finding ways to work with them that people will find helpful or at least fun.
Appreciate it. Keith, I want to just say thanks. Appreciate your time. It was great speaking with you again.
Yeah, love you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, guys. That was incredible. I need some more Dunkin locations in LA. There's only like one near me. So
we're working on it. We're working on it.
I love it. Fantastic. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, guys. Be well.
Thanks, Jim. It's good to see you.
Keith, you as well.
Bye now.
Awesome. So great to hear from Dunkin. Now, please welcome to the stage Brett Richardson, the Senior Media Manager from Chobani, and Nancy Winay, the Vice President of Advertising